This presentation is an overview of the concept of patterns of strengths and weaknesses, also known as PSW. The purpose of this training is to provide an introduction to the concept of PSW. At the end of this training, you'll be taken to a draft of the policy document. This is only a draft and is for review and comment. Additional in-person training will be provided to the special education teams beginning May 2016. Your schools will be contacted to schedule that training very soon. PSW, Pattern of Strengths and Weaknesses. The general idea is to utilize a student's normative and relative performance to assess learning disabilities. Multiple models have been developed. D/CM, or Discrepancy/Consistency, by Naglieri and Hale. C-DM, or Concordance/Discordance, by Hale and Fiorello, or XBA, the Cross-Battery Assessment, by Flanagan, Ortiz, and Alfonso. They're all based on the Cattell-Horn-Carroll theory of intelligences. You can see the DSD-PSW website for references to all of the different models and a description of the technical terms like Cattell-Horn-Carroll and concordance, etc. used on this slide. The DSD Special Ed model is based on the Cross-Battery Assessment model with elements from the Milton-Den included. Don't worry, this is as technical as this presentation will get. Now you're probably asking yourself, normative versus relative. What is she talking about? Normative scores are standard scores that are compared to a normal sample. For example, results of standardized norm reference testing. Like the KTA-3 considers standard scores between 85 and 115 as average. Normative scores are typically demonstrated on a bell curve. Relative scores are standard scores that are compared only to the individual student's outcomes. Instead of comparing results to the whole testing sample, you compare the scores of the evaluation for the individual student. Thus, the results are relative to his own skills. This analysis is easier to see on a line graph. In the end, the outcome remains the same. We're working toward IDEA eligibility determination. The Pattern of Strengths and Weaknesses model does a better job of meeting the definition from the Utah State Office of Education rule, which says that specific learning disabilities is a disorder of a basic psychological process involved in using and understanding language, either spoken or written. Pattern of Strengths and Weaknesses allows us to move away from rolling the discrepancy dice. Now the IEP team drives the decision, and the assessment guides effective instruction. This slide will compare and contrast the discrepancy method with the Pattern of Strengths and Weaknesses method. The discrepancy method is based on the confidence interval for the discrepancy between two specific ability and achievement scores, whereas PSW is based on the relationship of cognitive processes to academic ability. The discrepancy method usually relies on the overall IQ score or a single score from the cognitive measure, whereas PSW uses the entire IQ assessment to represent a student's cognitive profile to avoid falsely identifying a student as learning disabled. The discrepancy method forces teams to rely on a formula that is calculated by a computer. This is difficult to explain and doesn't relate to classroom instruction. PSW uses evaluation findings to guide eligibility decisions, if applicable, IEP goals, and guides instruction. The information contained in a discrepancy report is obscure and difficult to explain during an IEP meeting. The findings do not directly relate to the student's performance in the educational setting. When compared to an example of a patterns of strengths and weaknesses score comparison, the relationship between the student's weaknesses in verbal comprehension, fluid reasoning, and reading comprehension are apparent. The team can discuss how his comprehension of vocabulary and ability to understand novel information impact his ability to understand information he is reading. Then, this leads to a discussion of how to address his needs in the classroom via individualized goals and accommodations. Under the RTI with PSW model, there are still specific requirements for eligibility. There will still be requirements for minimum scores. Pre-referral intervention is and will still remain an integral part of the process. Formal and informal evaluation is required for every eligibility determination. Scores will need to be below specific values in order for the students to qualify, and there will need to be split scores to be considered a strength and a weakness. A relationship will need to exist between the academic and aptitude performance. Some things won't change. The student will have to continue to qualify in one or more of the 8 areas of specific learning disability, which are listed below. Those are oral expression, listening comprehension, written expression, basic reading skills, reading fluency skills, reading comprehension, mathematics calculation, mathematics problem solving. Another area that won't change is the pre-referral intervention process. I'm going to take a little bit of time and review what response to intervention looks like. First, the general education teacher identifies an academic concern. Then, Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions are implemented in the general education classroom. If the student doesn't respond well to those interventions, the general education teacher goes to the local case management team. The general education teacher collaborates with the local case management team to consider variables, analyze current data, discuss exclusionary factors, and develop targeted Tier 3 interventions. The Tier 3 interventions, or response to intervention, is implemented for about 2 weeks. Then the teacher reviews the data and, if necessary, meets with the student support or local case management team to analyze the variables, consider the data, and discuss the exclusionary factors. This process is repeated as long as the student is responding to the interventions or until the student is performing at the expected grade level. A formal referral for special education evaluation is made if a student fails to respond to the interventions and subsequent interventions, probably 2 subsequent interventions, or if a student is not making progress in the grade level and the team feels that it is appropriate to make a referral for special education evaluation. The process is a little bit different if the parent makes the referral. See the PI site for additional information. The benefits of the pattern of strengths and weaknesses model are many. It links the assessment results to the student's classroom experiences and performance. It leads professional conversations about the student's needs and how to provide effective programs, including goals, services, accommodations, and modifications. It's more transparent and meaningful for parents, educators, and students. It empowers teams to make decisions based on students' needs. And it adds standardized assessments data to the RTI process for initial and reevaluation procedures. Here's what you can expect next for training. We're just getting started. This is our warm-up. You're getting this presentation, we have a website, and we're going to start a newsletter. We're going to do some more targeted training beginning in May and wrapping up in July. And then we're going to do some intensive and large-scale training beginning next year, starting up in about August and ongoing throughout the remainder of next year. Drum roll, please. Policy review. Who doesn't love to read policy? Okay, maybe I'm the only one. But we'd love to have your feedback on the policy that we have drafted so far. You can download the policy and print it out and write on the paper copy and then scan it and send it back to us. Or there's a Word version and you can open it and make your comments and changes there and send that back to us as well. Either way, please send your suggestions and changes to Joe Viscaccio. He's our fearless leader. We won't be able to take your comments if they're anonymous because we want to know who has given us such great feedback. Please get your comments and information sent back to us by April 20th. I know that's pretty tight, but we have a lot of information to process before we start training, and we really need your feedback. So again, access the policy, review it as soon as possible, and send that information to Joe. That's right, Joe Viscaccio. His email's here, and it's also on that web page. Thanks. If I haven't mentioned it already, there's additional information on, right, you guessed it, the website. Thanks for your time.